Hi there, and welcome to the Neckpour. My name's Lewis, and welcome to the Whisky Review channel, where I give you my thoughts and opinions on a particular bottle of whisky, from the Neckpour all the way down to the dregs. You join me here for another episode of the Neckpour, where we're looking at this bottle of Bunnahabhain Stiuireadair. Before we get started, I would like to ask that you head below the video, drop it a like if you're enjoying the content, leave me a comment if you've got thoughts on this bottle or any of the other Bunnahabhain bottles, or have a bottle you'd like to see me review. And please hit the subscribe and the notification bell if you'd like to be notified when I next post. So yeah, this is a new pickup to me. It's the Stiuireadair, meaning helmsman in Gaelic, and it's a non-age stated and heavily sherried whisky from Bunnahabhain, as they're known for. Looking online, there's a bit of talk as to whether this is unpeated or whether it's incredibly lightly peated. So let's see when we give it a taste if we can pick anything up. But having a look at it, it does appear to be non-chill filtered, natural colour, and it's 46.3%. So it's meeting all the stats that we want to see. Just sadly, it is no age stated, and that's not a problem. I've got no issue with young whisky, but I would like to know the age of what we're drinking in terms of how much of it was 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, 6 year, whatever the case may be, because I imagine it's not all just 3 years and a day that's gone into this. I imagine there's probably some older stuff, but who knows. And yeah, I'd prefer it if they were just a little more open and gave us those stats straight off the back, because I think the discerning whisky drinker cares about those things and is intrigued by those things, because that's certainly my opinion. I have no problem buying young whisky. It's just I'd like to know exactly what I'm putting in my glass. However, out of all of the key stats they could give us, the non-chill filtered is the biggest one to me. The good strength, the natural colour, they're all there, so I can let the non-age statement pass, as you've seen by the fact that I've bought it. But yeah, let's get this open and let's pour ourselves a little glass, shall we? As with all Bunnahabhains, or at least all the ones I've seen that are put out by themselves, it's in these super dark bottles. And I was just thinking earlier, as I was kind of getting ready to film this, it seems to be quite an Islay thing. When you think about Kalila, Lafroig, Bruichladdich, and Bunnahabhain, I don't know if I'm missing anyone else out that does it. And even Ardbeg, there seems to be a disproportionate number of non-clear glass bottles used on Islay, which doesn't seem to really be the case anywhere else in Scotland. And if anyone knows the reason why, please drop me a comment below, because I'm super interested to know what that's all about. Because yeah, it seems like a pretty unique phenomenon to Islay. But yeah, before I carry on waffling, let's get us a dram poured. Let's have a little listen to the cork, shall we? Pretty nice cork pop. Not the tightest cork. I don't think this bottle will be able to stick around for too long based on that. And I do always find it weird not being able to see the colour of the whisky before I pour it. It's quite a healthy dram I've poured myself there, but I'm sure I won't let it go to waste. So reading the back of the bottle, it states a high proportion of sherry casks, so it probably means there is bourbon cask in there as well. Whereas I had thought initially, because everything you hear about this whisky is purely talking about the sherry, I thought perhaps it was exclusively sherry cask matured, but no, it seems like there is also some bourbon, perhaps other casks in there as well. But yeah, mostly sherry casks. And yeah, you can, if these are all sherry casks, you can see how young it is just from how light that colour is. I mean, I don't know if you can get a good colour of it there, but I will get some up close footage of it as well. And you can see that is a pretty kind of pale straw colour. So let's get a little bit of air in there. Let's introduce it to the glass before we get our nose in and have a good old smell. straight away on the nose, there's a little bit of youth there. You can tell it's not a super old whiskey, but there is a bit of sea air, along with a kind of, not necessarily a spice from the sherry, but more a nut from the sherry, you know. Mixed with the sea air, it's almost a kind of salted nut, with a little bit of maybe toffee, and a little bit of grain. But yeah, still a little bit young, still a little bit raw. It's not the thickest, not the most coating the glass, considering its strength and its non-chill filtration, but it's still very inviting. And yeah, I'll give it a few more sniffs before I go in for a taste. Just I always find when you're trying a new whiskey, smelling it a little bit longer just kind of gets your palate a bit more used and a bit more prepared for what might be coming. But yeah, let's have a taste. Baking spices, pepper, cereal, that maritiminess. I'm not really picking it up at all on the taste, and I would say that they're probably using quite a lot of refill casks in this, because it's got no astringency that I sometimes find you get from a first fill sherry cask. But yeah, that's really quite pleasant. It's still a little bit young, and a little bit of that pepper and spice at the start. I think some of it is from the sherry casks. I think some of it is from young spirit. But no, that's a really good whiskey. To me at first taste, I'm pretty happy with that. Again, the finish is a little bit short, and it's surprisingly a little bit thin, but the finish is still quite warming. It's quite nice, but there's no, I can't feel the whiskey hug, as they call it, as it goes down the throat. Despite being 46%, I'm not picking up, too much big, rich, oiliness. So I'd say it's probably quite a sort of refined spirit. And quite different to the other Bunnahabhains I've tried before. I've tried a couple of, I've tried a 12, I've tried a 12 cask strength, and I've tried an independent, I think it was a 10 cask strength, and they were all much bigger and richer and rounder. And yeah, maybe this is, a little bit of their weaker casks, as it were, blended together. However, that's not to say by any stretch of the imagination is it a bad whiskey. I'm not enjoying it. I appreciate double negatives are never a great thing to say. I am enjoying it, but it's just not perhaps quite at the standards I was hoping for. But let's see what a drop of water does to it, because I think that could be the key to opening this one up. So to some people that might look like a reasonable amount of water. However, when you are up at 46%, I think it gives you more space to put more water into it. Gives you a bit more headroom to play around with it. Let's give that a few seconds to sort of come together. And I have to say, although drinking it, it is the Neckpour. It's not at any time to oxidise. It's not at any time to... I know people say whiskey doesn't age in the bottle. However, between the Neckpour and the dregs, whiskey does change. And it is oxidisation with the air in the bottle. This is the first bit of the whiskey, so it's had the least oxidisation, and that's particularly key when you're talking about really young whiskies, because they've not had the time in the cask, where the cask breathes and oxidizes the whiskey that way. And so it will round some of those edges out, smooth some of the edges out. But at the same time, you might lose certain things as well. And so in a older, super finely crafted whiskey, you don't want it open too long, because you're running the risk of losing some of those things that make it really special. But in something like this, which is young and, you know, not a super fancy whiskey, you want to, you know, perhaps round out some of those things that aren't quite perfect and give everything a chance to sort of come together, because yeah, it should hopefully improve. However, at the price point, this is probably one of the better bottles you can pick up at a supermarket. My partner picked this up for me because she saw it at £27 in Sainsbury's. And I mean, when you're looking at the supermarket shelves, there's not much 46% whiskey. There's not much natural colour whiskey. There's not much non-chill filtered whiskey. And there's barely anything that's all three of them at the same time. So, I mean, at that price point, at that level of availability, this is really good. You know, you could go into a shop and comfortably pay a heck of a lot more than this for something with a heck of a less impressive performance. And, you know, if you're adding that much water to a 40% whiskey, but then you're watering it down to a point where it's not even legally whiskey anymore. Granted, it's your whiskey and you do what you want with it. But I always think once you're getting down below kind of 35 or so percent, you start losing certain things and it does get a bit watery. Whereas when you're starting from that higher base point, as this does, you've got more space to play around. So yeah, let's have another little look at this now it's had the water in. I mean, it's still pretty clear. You know, there's barely a mist forming. I know it's not had a huge amount of time in the glass with the water. There's maybe a slight clouding to that, but hard to tell once you've handled the glass whether that might be your thumbprints. But yeah, let's give it a sniff. You can see it's behaving quite differently. It's actually sliding down off the sides of the glass much quicker, but it's much streakier. It's leaving much more, as they call it in the word of wine, legs, not dregs. Yeah, it's leaving much more legs on the glass, but it's not gripping as hard to the sides. But yeah, let's give it a sniff and see if that's changed at all. That's much lighter. That's much more floral. It's less salty. And it's a bit more fruity and a bit less barley-like. But yeah, let's give that a taste. Wow. And that shows the importance of water. At that point, I mean, the bottle's now been open, what, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes. I'm not sure exactly how long I've been filming at this point. It depends how much ends up on the cutting room floor, I guess. But that is already, in my opinion, much improved. There's tons more character to it. It's much more kind of rounded. It's much more rich. It's just, well, it's one of those things that's, until you kind of understand the chemistry behind whiskey and the way that water soluble and alcohol soluble molecules and esters and flavonoids and all those kind of things work, it's quite confusing, because, you know, you're watering down the whiskey to strengthen the flavor and to improve the richness, and it just kind of doesn't quite make sense. But you're just gonna have to trust me on this one. You know, it really does add something in this particular occasion. And not all the time will it. If a whiskey's been really heavily chill filtered and you've washed a load of those things out of it, adding the water is just going to water it down at that point. It's just going to be squash. And you're just going to wash those things out because they've already come out in the chill filtration process. But no, this is really nice. With that drop of water in there, we're getting loads more kind of sherry influences, but because it's now a little bit weaker in terms of alcohol strength, and because it's not been in those casks super long, and I would guess they're probably mostly second fill casks, it's by no means a sherry bomb. It's certainly a quite sherried whiskey, but it's not like drinking an Aberlour Abuna, for example, or a lot of the Glenallachys that are super duper sherried and just really like bang straight in your face. This is a much more, there's a kind of quite a delicate floral sort of distillate as the kind of backbone, but then you're getting sort of nuts, chocolate, spices, all those things on the palate just coming in towards the end of the palate and then lingering in the finish, whereas the front palate is that lovely fruity distillate and just the tiniest little hint of salinity just in the very background before that sherry kind of comes through and washes it away and leaves you with a really warming sherried finish, which is, a kind of ideal drop for the winter. Although the weather's been kind of unseasonably pretty good at the moment in England, this is still light enough that it could certainly be a summer sipper as well. It's really, really quite enjoyable. But yeah, I don't have that much more to say about this bottle at this time, really, other than so far so good, particularly with that little bit of water added. I think we could be onto a bit of a winner here. That's really nice whiskey. And, the guys that own Bunnahabhain also own Tobermory and Deanston, I believe, which are, Lechaig and Deanston are certainly a bit of the darlings of the online whiskey world at the moment. And I mean, Bunnahabhain's always been a pretty well-respected brand. So I figured anything they're going to be putting out, even the non-aged state stuff, still going to be probably pretty good quality. And yeah, once I added that water, I'm pretty happy with that. That's certainly a bottle that I'm interested to see how it develops, because this is one I really can see improving quite substantially. And the longer I give it, however, it is so enjoyable and easy and approachable, I'm not sure I'm going to have it long enough for all of that character perhaps to quite develop. So we'll have to monitor how we go, and I certainly will be back to film the dregs with this. And I think we could be onto an absolute sort of budget banger of a whiskey here, at that kind of sub £30 price point. I mean, if there's anything you guys can think of that competes with this, that let me know, because I'd love to kind of get some more suggestions on things in that kind of super low price point category that I could taste alongside this, or I could taste, subsequently and compare notes. And it'd also be interesting to know if you guys have got any supermarket bottles that are better than this. Because, yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not sure there's that much I can think of, other than when they have the very odd thing in. Like if they have something in kind of randomly that somewhere's kicking out a load of bottles because they're massively overproduced based on demand and things. But as a kind of core product that stores hold, I can't think of much better than this off the top of my head, and certainly not presented as well as this. Before you go, though, I would like to say, if you've enjoyed the content, please drop me a like. Put something in the comments below if you've got anything to say about this bottle, any other Bunnahabhains, or any bottles you'd like to see me review. And hit subscribe and the notification bell if you'd like to be notified when I next post. Until the next time, I'd love for you to join me for another episode of the Neckpour, the Dregs, or just another video on my thoughts on whiskey. Until then, cheers, Salancha, and I'll see you around.